mobbed a hospital filled with unarmed men, women, and children. There will be no survivors. If you think for 1 second that the
It's just war against the modern barbarians, the worst monsters on the planet. Thank you, Rishi, for coming here.
Well, Prime Minister, thank you for your warm words and for welcoming me to Israel. I'm just sorry to be here in such terrible circumstances. In the last 2 weeks, this country has gone through something that no country, no people should have to endure, least of all Israel, which has lived through some of the most awful scenes, the spectre of violence and terrorism every day of its existence. And I want to share the deep condolences of the British people and stress that we absolutely support Israel's right to defend itself in line with international law, to go after Hamas, to take back hostages, deter further incursions, and to strengthen your security for the long term.
What they say to me is I have no notion that the Palestinians are telling the truth about how many people are killed. I'm sure innocents have been killed, and it's the price of waging a war. I think we should be incredibly careful. I think not we, Israel should be incredibly careful to be sure that they're focusing on going after the folks that are propagating this war against Israel. And it's against their interest when that doesn't happen. But I have no confidence in the number that the Palestinians are using. I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things. The fact is that Israel, as they respond to these attacks, seems to me that have to continue to ensure that you have what you need to defend yourselves. And we're going to make sure that occurs, as you know. And we have to also bear in mind that Hamas does not represent all the Palestinian people.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war, a war for our common future. Today we draw a line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. It is a time for everyone to decide where they stand. Israel will stand against the forces of barbarism until victory. I hope and pray that civilized nations everywhere will back this fight. Because Israel's fight is your fight. Because if Hamas and Iran's axis of evil win, you will be their next target. That's why Israel's victory will be your victory. But make no mistake, regardless of who stands with Israel, Israel will fight until this battle is won, and Israel will prevail. May God bless Israel, and may God bless all those who stand with Israel.
But today, as we tear down the walls of enmity, Israel can become a bridge of peace and prosperity between these continents. Peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia will truly create a new Middle East. Now look at what happens when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. We tear down the walls of enmity, we bring the possibility of prosperity and peace to this entire region, but we do something else.
Ternyata Yerusalem atau Palestina ini merupakan satu tempat yang terletak di 3 benua. Satu wilayah yang diapit oleh 3 benua, Eropa, Asia, dan Afrika. Dan ini satu-satunya wilayah di dunia yang seperti itu. Sehingga wajar saja bila banyak ahli, misal seperti Edward Said, yang sejatinya seorang orientalis sekalipun mengeluarkan teori of hurt untuk Palestina. Palestina sebagai jantung dunia. Maksudnya apa? Mari kita analogikan dengan sebuah jantung bagi manusia, yang semua kita tahu bahwasanya jantung adalah alat organ yang paling vital bagi manusia. Bahkan Rasulullah pun telah mengamini hal itu lewat wahyu. Yang jantung ini berfungsi mengalirkan darah yang mengandung seluruh hal yang dibutuhkan oleh tubuh ke seluruh tubuh manusia. Udara, air, nutrisi, DNA, sel, darah, dan lain sebagainya. Yang seandainya jantung ini tercemar atau sakit, maka pencemarannya akan menyebar ke seluruh tubuh. Maka sakitnya akan mempengaruhi ke seluruh tubuh secara vital. Begitu pula sebaliknya, jika jantung ini sehat dan baik, maka kebaikan itu akan dipompa ke seluruh tubuh manusia. Itulah teori of hurt. Baik tidaknya, sakit sehatnya dunia ini sangat bergantung pada wilayah vital yang bernama Palestina yang tidak luas banget ini. Layaknya ketergantungan tubuh manusia terhadap organ vital bernama heart atau jantung. Selanjutnya para ulama juga menyebut sebagai al-mizanu hadhil ummah, Palestina sebagai timbangan bagi umat ini, neraca bagi umat ini, tolak ukur bagi umat ini. Artinya kalau mau melihat kondisi umat ini secara keseluruhan, simpelnya maka lihatlah kondisi Palestina. Jadikan Palestina sebagai patokannya. Siapa yang menguasai Palestina, maka dialah penguasa dunia yang sebenarnya. Layaknya ia menguasai kolbu, layaknya ia menguasai jantung. Dialah negara superpower yang sebenarnya. Dia penguasa neraca sebenarnya.
A few years ago, I stood here with a red marker to show the curse, a great curse, the curse of a nuclear Iran. But today I bring this marker to show a great blessing, the blessing of a new Middle East between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and our other neighbors. We will not only bring down barriers between Israel and our neighbors, we'll build a new corridor of peace and prosperity that connects Asia through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to Europe. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change, another pivot of history.
Hey, you want to know? Here's an easy way to know if you are controlled. Is there somebody or something that you're not allowed to criticize?
That's right.
Simple as that. If you lived in Nazi Germany, you couldn't criticize the Nazi Party. If you lived in the Soviet Union, you couldn't criticize the Communist Party of Russia. If you live in China right now, you can't criticize the Chinese Communist Party. If you live in North Korea, you can't criticize Kim Jong-un. If you live in Cuba, you can't criticize the Cuban Communist Party. If you live in America, who can't you criticize? Who can't you criticize in America?
The Jewish lobby.
Yes.
On both sides. Right.
That's right. That tells you who controls the country. You're not. The fact that we're having this discussion and we're on the edge. All right. Everybody knows here. This is the edge.
Oh yeah.
Why are we on the edge? Because we're touching the third rail. We're breaking the taboo. You're not allowed to discuss the power of the Israeli lobby in America. That's proof right there. They control America. That's who's controlling free speech in this country. That's who's eliminating the ability to criticize Planned Parenthood. Because who owns Planned Parenthood? Who owns the pornography industry? Let's go down the list. See, they're going to crush anybody who questions their power. And they have that power. It's on both sides, as you said. Democrats and Republicans, they all bow down to the Israeli lobby.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start with this second blast at the Jabalia refugee camp. It was confirmed to be an Israeli airstrike, the second one in 2 days in that area. The first one, we understand, wounded or killed several hundred civilians. Could you provide more information about the second strike and exactly who the IDF was targeting?
No, unfortunately not, Boris. I cannot provide any information about operational military activity that is happening right now on the ground in Gaza, nor can I provide any information about military strategy moving ahead. What I can tell you is what the IDF spokesperson unit released yesterday, and that is that Israel targeted a top Hamas commander who was hiding along with many Hamas terrorists in a massive terror tunnel complex in that area. This is the only reason why Israel operated there. We said that we will get to the perpetrators of the October 7th massacre, and we mean it. We will get to them one after the other. We want to minimize civilian casualties as we do that. But as you know, in every war since the dawn of history, there are unfortunately tragedies and civilian casualties. But I was listening to your reporting earlier, and let me just ask you this. You know that there were more German civilian casualties in World War II than American or British. That doesn't mean that the Germans were the good guys, right? And that the Allies were the bad guys. We're talking about a jihadist Nazi ideology that has to be eradicated. We're dealing with pure evil here. And this is a matter of life and death to Israelis. It is that serious. But I can tell you that we are not targeting anyone else in Gaza but civilians. Hamas is cynically, but rather terrorists, of course. We are not targeting anyone else in Gaza but civilians. But rather terrorists, of course. Civilians. But rather civilians.
We are not the victims. Sorry, we are the victims. We are not the aggressors.
We need to see a cease. We need to see a humanitarian pause so we can flow. We need to see ceasing of the levels of violence that we're seeing. We need to see civilians protected. We need to see a humanitarian pause to get aid in, to get Canadians out, to get vulnerable people out, to get hostages released. These are the things that the people around the world are looking for.